The service elevator groaned its way up to the 42nd floor of the Castellano Tower, and Emma clutched her cleaning cart tighter as another wave of exhaustion hit her. 3 a.m. Most people her age were either sleeping off bad decisions or making them in nightclubs across Chicago, but here she was, invisible in her gray uniform, about to spend the next 4 hours scrubbing offices that already gleamed. Her reflection stared back from the polished steel doors, hollow eyes, pale skin that hadn't seen proper sunlight in months, dark hair scraped back in the mandatory bun that made her look older than her 23 years. She looked exactly like what she was, desperate, exhausted, and one missed paycheck away from disaster. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The elevator dinged softly, and Emma wheeled her cart into the executive floor's reception area. Marble floors reflected the city lights streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, creating patterns that made her dizzy if she stared too long. This floor was different from the others, no cubicles, no copy machines humming with forgotten print jobs. Just mahogany doors leading to corner offices worth more than she'd make in 10 lifetimes. She pulled out her checklist, squinting at Maria's handwriting. The cleaning supervisor's instructions were always precise, but tonight, something was different. Conference room A had been crossed out 3 times, with "Do not enter until 5 a.m. written in red ink beside it. Emma checked her watch. 3:07 a.m. 2 hours to clean everything else, then tackle whatever mess the executives had left behind. The familiar rhythm of work took over. Spray, wipe, vacuum, repeat. She moved through the offices like a ghost, careful not to disturb the carefully arranged papers, the family photos, the awards that meant everything to someone and nothing to her. In the CFO's office, she found half a birthday cake in the trash chocolate with real buttercream frosting. Her stomach clenched with hunger, but she moved on. Taking food from the trash was grounds for termination, and she needed this job more than she needed dignity. By the time she reached the hallway leading to conference room A, her back ached, and her hands were raw inside the industrial gloves. She glanced at her watch. 4:53 a.m. 7 more minutes. She could start gathering the trash from the smaller conference rooms while she waited. That's when she heard it. Voices, low and urgent, coming from behind conference room A's heavy door. Emma froze, her hand halfway to conference room B's handle. The executives never stayed this late. Even during merger season, they were gone by midnight, leaving only security guards and the cleaning crew to haunt the empty floors. The voices grew louder, though she couldn't make out words through the thick wood. Then came a sound that made her blood run cold, the unmistakable crack of flesh hitting flesh, followed by a muffled scream. Emma's mind screamed at her to run, to get back to the elevator and pretend she'd never been on this floor, but her legs wouldn't move. Another scream, this one cut short, and then a man's voice, calm and cold. "I asked you a question, Vincent. Where is my money?" She should leave. She should definitely leave. But her hand was already on the door handle to conference room B, and she found herself opening it, slipping inside where she could press her ear to the shared wall. Through the thin partition, the voices became clearer. "Please, Mr. Castellano, I just need more time. You've had 3 months. The cold voice again, smooth as aged whiskey and twice as dangerous. 3 months of excuses, 3 months of broken promises. My patience has limits." Emma's hand flew to her mouth. Castellano, even she knew that name, whispered in the break room when people thought no one was listening. The Castellano family owned half of Chicago's construction industry, their trucks on every major project, their influence reaching from City Hall to the docks. But everyone knew construction was just the legal front for something much darker. "My daughter, she's been sick, the medical bills." Vincent's voice broke into a sob. "Not my problem." A pause, then the sound of something heavy being dragged across the floor. "You borrowed from me, Vincent. You knew the terms. You knew what would happen if you couldn't pay." Emma pressed closer to the wall, her heart hammering so loud she was certain they could hear it through the partition. She should run. Every instinct screamed at her to get out before the door to conference room B burst open. Fluorescent light flooding in from the hallway. Emma spun around, her mouth opening in a silent scream, to find a man in an expensive suit staring at her with dead eyes. He was massive, his shoulders filling the doorframe, a gun visible beneath his jacket. "Boss," he called over his shoulder, never taking his eyes off Emma. "We have a problem." The connecting door between the conference rooms opened, and Emma's world tilted off its axis. The man who walked through looked like he'd stepped out of a Renaissance painting, all sharp angles and dark beauty, with eyes the color of bitter coffee and twice as dark. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her yearly salary, and he moved with the fluid grace of a predator perfectly at home in his environment. This was Lorenzo Castellano. She knew it without being told, felt it in the way the air seemed to thin around him, the way her body instinctively tried to make itself smaller. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe early 30s, but his eyes held the weight of someone who'd seen too much and decided to become worse than what he'd witnessed. His gaze swept over her, taking in the gray uniform, the cleaning cart visible through the doorway, the way she trembled like a bird with a broken wing. Something flickered in those dark eyes, annoyance maybe, or calculation. "What's your name?" His voice was exactly as she'd heard through the wall, smooth and cold and terrifying. Emma opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Her throat had closed completely, fear freezing her vocal cords. She tried again, managing only a whispered, "Emma, Emma." He stepped closer, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something metallic blood, she realized with a sick lurch. Emma who cleans my offices at 3 a.m. Emma who was supposed to wait until 5 to enter this area. She found her voice, thin and reedy. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I heard screaming and I thought someone was hurt and You just thought you'd investigate." His eyebrow arched, and somehow that small expression was more terrifying than if he'd pulled a gun. How noble. Through the connecting door, she could see into conference room A. A man sat tied to a chair, his face a mess of blood and bruises. Vincent, she assumed. 2 more men in suits stood nearby, one cleaning blood off his knuckles with a handkerchief. The scene was so surreal, so impossible, that Emma felt like she'd stumbled into someone else's nightmare. "Please," she whispered. "I won't tell anyone. I didn't see anything. I'll just go and— Marco." Lorenzo didn't raise his voice, but the massive man stepped forward immediately. "Check her." Before Emma could process what was happening, Marco's hands were on her, patting her down with professional efficiency. She stood frozen, humiliation burning through the fear as he pulled her phone from her pocket, then the small canister of pepper spray she carried for the walk to the bus stop. "Just these," Marco said, handing both items to Lorenzo. Lorenzo turned her phone over in his hands, his thumb moving across the screen. It was locked, of course, but he studied it like he could divine her secrets, through the cracked screen protector. "Emma," he said again. And she realized he was scrolling through her emergency contact information, visible on the lock screen. "Emma, Chen, 23 years old, lives in Chinatown with her grandmother." Her blood turned to ice. "Your Metro card," he said, pulling it from the phone case. "Monthly pass, Chinatown address printed on the replacement card form you so helpfully filled out." He looked up at her, and she saw something shift in his expression. "Your emergency contact is Lily Chen, relationship, grandmother. No parents listed." Tears burned her eyes. "Please, I just clean offices. I'm nobody. I won't say anything about whatever this is." "No," Lorenzo agreed. "You won't." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Emma's legs gave out, and she would have collapsed if Marco hadn't caught her arm, holding her upright with surprising gentleness. "Interesting," Lorenzo murmured, watching her reaction. "You're terrified, but you haven't screamed. You haven't tried to run. You haven't even asked what we're going to do to you." He moved closer, close enough that she could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "Why is that, Emma?" The truth tumbled out before she could stop it. "Because it wouldn't matter. Screaming won't help. Running won't work. And asking questions I don't want answers to would just make this worse." Something flickered across his face, surprise maybe, or respect. "Smart girl." He stepped back, addressing Marco. "Clear the room." "Boss?" Marco's confusion was evident. Everyone out except her. Lorenzo didn't repeat himself, didn't raise his voice, but suddenly the room was in motion. The men from conference room A filed out, dragging the bloodied Vincent between them. Marco hesitated at the door, shooting Emma a look that might have been pity, before closing it behind him. And then they were alone. Emma stayed perfectly still, afraid that any movement might trigger something terrible. Lorenzo walked to the window, looking out at the glittering cityscape below. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "You know what I am," he finally said, not a question. "Yes," she whispered. "You know what happens to people who see things they shouldn't." "Yes." He turned from the window, studying her with those dark eyes. "And yet you're not begging." Emma forced herself to meet his gaze. Would it help? No. He moved closer, and she caught that scent again, expensive cologne and violence. But people always try anyway. It's human nature, the desperate hope that words might change what's already been decided. He stopped just out of arm's reach. So why aren't you? The answer came from somewhere deep, somewhere honest and raw. Because I'm tired. I'm so tired of begging for things that never come. Begging for more hours at work, begging for extensions on rent, begging for just a little more time to make everything work. If this is how it ends, at least I can stop fighting for once. The silence that followed felt infinite. Lorenzo's expression shifted through several things she couldn't read before settling on something that looked almost like understanding. You clean this floor every night? Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The change of subject threw her. Monday through Friday. Yes. And you live in Chinatown with your grandmother. Yes. Parents? Emma's jaw tightened. Dead. Car accident when I was 15. And you've been taking care of your grandmother since then. It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. She raised me. When my parents died, she was all I had. Now I'm all she has. Lorenzo walked to the conference table, picking up a glass of whiskey someone had abandoned. He studied the amber liquid like it held answers. What's wrong with her? Dementia, Emma said, the word bitter on her tongue. Early stages, but getting worse. She needs someone with her, but I can't afford proper care, so I work nights and watch her during the day. My neighbor, Mrs. Liu, checks on her when I'm gone. You sleep? Sometimes. He set down the glass with a soft click. Marco! The door opened immediately, and the big man appeared. Run a full background on Emma Chen. Everything. I want to know every job she's had, every bill she's paid, every person she's talked to in the last year. On it, boss. The door closed again, and Emma felt her small hope of walking out of here evaporate. They were investigating her, which meant they were deciding whether she was a threat, which meant, you're trying to calculate survival odds, Lorenzo observed. I can see it in your eyes, the way your mind is racing through possibilities. Tell me, what conclusion have you reached? Emma swallowed hard. That it doesn't matter what your investigation finds. I saw what I saw. That makes me a liability regardless of whether I'm a good person or not. Unless, she blinked, not expecting the question. Unless what? You're smart enough to know you're a liability. You're also smart enough to know I haven't killed you yet, which means there might be an unless. So tell me, Emma Chen, who cleans my offices and cares for her sick grandmother, what might change the equation? Emma's mind raced. What could she possibly offer someone like Lorenzo Castellano? She had no money, no connections, no skills beyond cleaning, and the basic Mandarin her grandmother had taught her. But there had been something in his eyes when she'd mentioned her grandmother, when she'd talked about being tired of begging, something that looked like recognition. I don't know, she admitted. I don't know what someone like me could offer someone like you. But, she hesitated, then plunged forward, because what did she have to lose? But you didn't clear the room to kill me. You could have done that with an audience. You cleared the room to talk to me, which means you're curious about something. And what do you think I'm curious about? Why I didn't react the way you expected. Why I'm not begging or crying or trying to seduce my way out of this. His lips twitched in what might have been amusement. Seduce? Heat flooded her cheeks. It's what people think, isn't it? That women can trade their bodies for survival. But you're not the type who'd be swayed by that, and I'm not the type who'd try. What type are you then? Emma thought about it, really thought about it. The invisible type. The kind who cleans your world without being seen, who exists in the margins of your life. Until tonight, you've probably never noticed me. Even though I've been cleaning this office for 6 months. I know which brand of whiskey you drink, how you take your coffee based on the stains in your mug, that you're left-handed from the way your papers are arranged. But to you, I'm just part of the scenery. Lorenzo moved then, so fast she barely saw it, until he was standing directly in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. You've been watching me. No, she said quickly. I've been cleaning. But cleaning means noticing things. It's my job to put everything back exactly as it was, which means I have to pay attention to how things are. Tell me what else you've noticed. It felt like a test, one where failure meant death. Emma's mind raced through 6 months of observations. You work late Tuesdays and Thursdays, but you're always gone by 11. You had a regular meeting with someone who wore strong perfume, jasmine, and vanilla, but those stopped about 2 months ago. You've been drinking more since then, based on the bottles in your trash. You keep a gun in the 3rd drawer of your desk, but you moved it to the 2nd drawer 3 weeks ago. There's a photo in your top drawer, face down, that you look at sometimes because your fingerprints are all over it, but I've never seen who's in it because that would be crossing a line. His hand moved to her throat, not choking, just resting there, feeling her pulse race beneath his fingers. You could be a spy. I'm not. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Check my background. You'll find exactly what I told you. A girl who lost her parents, who's trying to take care of the only family she has left, who works herself to exhaustion for minimum wage, plus a 50-cent night differential. I'm not interesting enough to be a spy. No, he agreed, his thumb tracing the edge of her jaw. But you're interesting enough to notice things others miss. To stay calm when others would panic. To think when others would just react. His hand dropped, and she could breathe again. The photo is my sister. She died 2 months ago. The perfume you smelled was hers. She always wore too much of it. Emma's heart clenched. I'm sorry. Are you? Yes. Losing family is. She thought of her parents, of the crushing weight of sudden absence. It's like losing parts of yourself you didn't know were there until they're gone. Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the cold facade. Marco's report will be clean, he said, moving away from her. I know it will be because you're exactly what you appear to be, someone trying to survive in a city that eats the weak. But that presents me with a problem. Because I saw too much. Because you saw too much, he confirmed. And despite what you might think, I don't enjoy killing innocents. Bad for business, bad for the soul, bad for sleep. Then don't. He turned back to her, eyebrow raised. Just like that? I should just let you walk out of here, trust that you'll keep quiet about Vincent and his debts? No, Emma said, surprising herself with her boldness. But you could use me. Use you? The idea formed as she spoke, desperate and probably stupid, but it was all she had. I'm invisible, remember? I clean offices all over the building, all over the city. I hear things, see things, notice things. People don't guard their words around the help. They have conversations like we're furniture, leave documents out like we can't read. You want to know what your enemies are planning? What your allies are really thinking? I'm better than a bug in their office because I'm a bug they invite in themselves. Lorenzo stood perfectly still, and Emma could practically see his mind working, calculating angles and advantages. You're offering to spy for me. I'm offering to survive, she corrected, and to be useful enough that my survival benefits you too. And if I asked you to do more than just listen and observe? If I needed you to plant something in an office, or retrieve something that wasn't mine? Emma thought of her grandmother, confused and frightened when the dementia took hold, dependent on Emma for everything. Then I'd do it. Just like that? No, not just like that. She met his gaze steadily. But my grandmother needs me. I need this job. And now I need you to not kill me. That's 3 needs that all point in the same direction. I'm practical enough to follow where necessity leads. Lorenzo walked back to the window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. You'd be mine, he said quietly. The moment you agree to this, you belong to me. Not romantically, I'm not that kind of monster. But your loyalty, your obedience, your silence, those would be mine absolutely. Betrayal would mean more than death. It would mean your grandmother dies alone and confused, wondering why you abandoned her. Do you understand? The threat should have made her angry. Instead, it just made her tired. Another cage, another set of chains. But at least these came with a chance of survival. I understand. He turned from the window. There's a company that cleans the Ferretti building downtown. Midwest Cleaning Solutions. You'll apply there tomorrow today. Actually, you'll be hired for the night shift, specifically for the executive floors. You'll continue working here as well. But you'll tell your supervisor you need to cut back to 3 nights a week for family reasons. The Ferretti family. Emma's voice trailed off. Everyone knew about the Ferrettis, the Castellanos' biggest rivals in the city. Has been encroaching on my territory. I need to know what they're planning, and I need to know it before they move. He pulled out his phone, typing something quickly. You'll receive a call this afternoon from Midwest. Answer it. Accept whatever they offer. Your pay there will be supplemented by me $5,000 a month, deposited to an account that won't be traced back to either of us. Emma's legs nearly gave out again. $5,000 a month would change everything. Proper care for her grandmother, Maybe even a better apartment, somewhere safer. That's the carrot, Lorenzo continued, reading her expression. You already know the stick. Vincent, by the way, will live. He's learned his lesson about borrowing from the wrong people. You'll clean this room as scheduled, and you'll find nothing unusual. Just another late-night meeting that ran long. Understood? Yes. He moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. If you ever feel like you're in danger, if someone at Ferretti's suspects you, if anything feels wrong, you call this number. He handed her a card, similar to the one in her phone case but with a different number. Don't be a hero. Dead spies are useless to me. Emma took the card with trembling fingers. Why are you trusting me? Lorenzo's hand was on the door handle, but he looked back at her, and for just a moment, she saw something human in those dark eyes. I'm not trusting you. I'm investing in you. There's a difference. Trust has to be earned. And how do I earn it? By surviving, he said simply. By being smart enough to stay alive in a world that wants to eat you whole. By proving that my investment was worthwhile. He opened the door, where Marco waited in the hallway. Clean this room thoroughly, then go home to your grandmother. Tomorrow, you begin your new life as someone who belongs to me. He was gone before she could respond, leaving her alone in a conference room that smelled of blood and expensive whiskey. Emma's legs finally gave out, and she sank into one of the leather chairs, her whole body shaking with delayed reaction. She'd survived. Somehow, impossibly, she'd survived an encounter with Lorenzo Castellano. But at what cost? She was his now, a possession, a tool, a spy in a war between families that had been killing each other since before she was born, but she was alive, and her grandmother would be cared for, and maybe, just maybe, being owned by Lorenzo Castellano was better than being crushed by poverty and exhaustion. Emma stood on unsteady legs and went to get her cleaning supplies. There was blood to clean, evidence to erase, a new life to begin. As she worked, she thought about Lorenzo's eyes, the way they'd softened when she'd mentioned his sister, the way he'd offered her a lifeline when he could have just as easily ordered her death. She didn't realize she was crying until a tear splashed onto the marble table, leaving a small mark that she carefully wiped away. No evidence, no trace of what had happened here. Just another invisible girl doing invisible work in a visible world. But now she belonged to someone who saw her, really saw her, and that terrified her more than death itself. The Ferretti building's executive floor smelled different from the Castellano Tower cigars instead of whiskey, leather polish heavy enough to choke, and underneath it all, something chemical that made Emma's nose itch. She'd been cleaning here for 2 weeks now, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights, learning the rhythms of a new kind of danger. The Ferrettis were old-school Italian, all crucifixes and family photos, with an office aesthetic that screamed 1980s power. Broker. Where Lorenzo's space was all clean lines and modern minimalism, the Ferrettis surrounded themselves with heavy wood furniture, burgundy carpets, and oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors who seemed to watch her work with disapproval. Emma pushed her cart past the secretary's desk, noting the fresh flowers, white roses, always white roses, delivered every Thursday like clockwork. She'd learned that detail mattered to Lorenzo, had texted it to the number he'd given her along with a dozen other observations that probably meant nothing but might mean everything. The executive bathroom was her first stop, and she was mixing cleaning solution when she heard voices approaching. Her body moved before her mind caught up, muscle memory from 2 weeks of paranoia. She slipped into the supply closet, pulling the door almost closed, leaving just enough of a crack to see through. 2 men entered the bathroom, their conversation echoing off the marble walls. Told him, it's too soon, the first voice said. Young, nervous. The Castellanos are still on edge after the Vincent situation. Emma's breath caught. They knew about Vincent? My father doesn't care about Castellano's feelings, the second voice replied, and Emma recognized it as Tony Ferretti, the heir apparent. She'd seen his photo on the desk downstairs, handsome in that aggressive way, all jaw and attitude. We move on the docks next week, whether Lorenzo's ready or not. But if he retaliates, then we'll bury him next to his sister. The casual cruelty of it made Emma's stomach turn. She pressed closer to the crack, trying to see more, and her elbow knocked against a bottle of bleach. It didn't fall, but it wobbled, the plastic creating a small sound that seemed deafening in the enclosed space. Both men froze. Did you hear that? Tony asked. Probably the cleaning girl, the younger man said. I saw her cart outside. Footsteps approached the closet, and Emma held her breath, her hand moving to the pepper spray in her pocket, useless against men like these. but its weight was comforting. The door yanked open, and she found herself staring up at Tony Ferretti's suspicious face. His eyes traveled over her, the gray uniform, the terrified expression she didn't have to fake, the way she hunched to make herself smaller. "You," he said. "How long have you been in here?" "I'm sorry, sir," Emma whispered, putting every ounce of submission into her voice. "I was just getting supplies. I didn't mean to." His hand shot out, grabbing her wrist hard enough to bruise. "I asked how long." "Just now," she gasped. "I just came in, I swear. I needed more glass cleaner." Tony studied her face, and Emma forced herself to look away, playing the part of the terrified immigrant girl who just wanted to keep her job. It wasn't hard, she was terrified, but she was also memorizing every word they'd said, filing it away for Lorenzo. "You're new," Tony said, his grip tightening. 2 weeks, sir. Please, I need this job. My grandmother. I don't care about your grandmother." He pulled her out of the closet, into the harsh bathroom light. "What's your name?" "Emma, sir." "Emma Chen." "Chinese?" "Yes, sir." Something shifted in his expression. A calculation she didn't like. "You speak English well for a Chinese girl." "I was born here, sir." His free hand came up to touch her face, and it took everything in Emma not to flinch away. "Pretty, too. You know, we could use someone like you for our parties. Serving drinks, looking decorative, better pay than cleaning toilets." The younger man shifted uncomfortably. "Tony, we should go. Your father's waiting." Tony's thumb traced her cheekbone, the touch making her skin crawl. "What do you say, Emma? Want to make some real money?" I just clean, sir. I'm not good at anything else." "I bet I could find something you're good at." Bile rose in her throat, but before she had to respond, Tony's phone rang. He released her with a small shove that sent her stumbling against the wall. "What?" He barked into the phone. His expression darkened. "Now? Fine. We're coming." He hung up, shooting Emma one last look. "We're not done here. I'll be checking on you, Emma Chen. Make sure you're where you're supposed to be." They left, and Emma collapsed against the sink, her whole body shaking. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers and typed out the message. "Ferretti moving on the docks next week. They know about Vincent. Tony Ferretti, asking about me." The response came within seconds. "Get out. Now." Emma didn't need to be told twice. She abandoned her cart, grabbed her jacket, and headed for the service elevator. But as the doors opened, a hand pressed against her back, and she was pushed inside. The doors closed, and she spun around to find Marco looming over her. "Easy," he said, hands up in a calming gesture. "Boss sent me to extract you." "How did you?" "We've had eyes on you since day one." He pressed the button for the parking garage. "You did good, getting that intel. But Tony Ferretti's got a reputation with women, especially the ones he thinks can't fight back." Emma's stomach churned. "I can handle it." "No," Marco said firmly. "You can't. And the boss doesn't want you to have to." The elevator opened into a parking garage, where a black town car waited, engine running. Marco opened the back door, and Emma slid inside to find Lorenzo waiting, his expression darker than she'd ever seen it. "Tell me everything," he commanded. Emma recounted the conversation word for word, watching his jaw tighten with each detail. When she got to Tony's advances, Lorenzo's hands clenched into fists. "He touched you?" "Just my wrist and face." "Nothing." "Show me." Emma pushed up her sleeve, revealing the bruises already forming in the shape of fingers. Lorenzo's expression went from dark to murderous. "Marco," he said, his voice deadly calm. "Double the security on the docks. Pull everyone in. If the Ferrettis want a war, they'll get one. Boss. And find out everything about Tony Ferretti's habits. Where he drinks, where he plays, where he's vulnerable." Marco nodded and pulled out his phone, already making calls. Lorenzo turned back to Emma, and she was startled to see concern mixed with the anger. "You're done at the Ferretti building. But the intelligence isn't worth what Tony will do to you if given the chance." His fingers ghosted over her bruised wrist, not quite touching. "I've seen his work. Girls who look like you, small and defenseless. They're his favorite. I won't have that on my conscience." "I'm not defenseless," Emma protested. "Against him you are." Lorenzo leaned back in the leather seat. "You'll be reassigned. Somewhere safer." "Where?" He was quiet for a moment, considering. "My home." Emma's heart stopped. "What?" "My housekeeper quit last month. Haven't found a replacement yet." He studied her reaction. "The pay is $20,000 a month. You'd work days, normal hours. Your grandmother can come with you. There's a guest house on the property. Full-time nurse care available. 20,000. Emma couldn't process it. Why would you? Because you've proven yourself useful. Because Tony Ferretti marked you, which means you're not safe anywhere else. And because... He paused, something shifting in his expression. Because you're the first person in a very long time to look at me without seeing only a monster or a meal ticket. I see both those things, Emma said honestly. His lips twitched. But you see something else too. What? Emma thought about it. A man who misses his sister. Who could have killed me but chose not to. Who sends his enforcer to protect a cleaning girl from a predator. That doesn't make me good. No, she agreed. But it makes you complicated. And complicated is more interesting than simple evil. The car had started moving, she realized, sliding through the dark streets of Chicago. Where are we going? To get your things. Your grandmother. You're moving tonight. I can't just... Tony will have your address within hours. Lorenzo's voice brooked no argument. He's not the type to let an interest go unexplored. Either you come with me tonight, or you and your grandmother disappear into witness protection. New names, new lives, never to return to Chicago. Your choice. It wasn't really a choice at all. Emma thought of her grandmother, confused and frightened by change, how another move might break what was left of her mind. Your home it is, she said quietly. Lorenzo nodded, pulling out his phone. Marco, send a team to... He looked at Emma questioningly. 4847 South Wentworth. Apartment 3B. You heard her. Pack everything. Be gentle with the grandmother, she has dementia. Have Dr. Morrison meet us at the estate. He hung up, then looked back at Emma. Any pets? Plants? Anything you can't live without? My mother's jewelry box. It's in my closet, top shelf. And there's a photo album under my bed. Everything else is just stuff. It'll be brought. He was quiet for a moment. You're handling this well. Emma laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. I'm not handling anything. I'm in shock. Tomorrow I'll probably cry for 3 hours straight. But right now, I'm just trying to survive the next 5 minutes. That's all any of us are doing, Lorenzo said, and there was something in his voice that made her look at him more closely. In the passing streetlights, she could see exhaustion written in the lines of his face, grief still fresh around his eyes. How did she die? The question slipped out before Emma could stop it. Kimble. Your sister. You don't have to answer, I shouldn't have car bomb, he said flatly. Meant for me. She borrowed my car to go shopping. His hands clenched again. The Ferrettis denied involvement, but I know it was them. The explosive signature, the timing, everything pointed to their bomb maker. I'm sorry. She was 24. Getting her master's in education. She wanted to teach kids. Can you believe that? A Castellano who wanted to teach kindergarten. His voice cracked slightly. She was the only good thing our family ever produced. Emma reached out without thinking, her hand covering his where it rested on the leather seat. He went completely still, staring at the contact like he'd never seen such a thing before. If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. What was her name? Emma asked softly. Sophia. The name came out like a prayer. She had this laugh that could fill a room, and she was always trying to save things: stray cats, broken birds, lost causes. She would have liked you. Why? Because you're a survivor who still has kindness in her eyes. He turned his hand palm up, his fingers interlacing with hers. That's rare in my world. The car pulled up to a building Emma recognized her own. But there were already men in dark suits stationed at the entrance, more by the stairwell. Lorenzo's people worked fast. Wait here, he said, but Emma shook her head. My grandmother won't go with strangers. She'll be frightened. Then we go together. And that's how Emma found herself walking up 3 flights of stairs with one of the most dangerous men in Chicago at her side, about to uproot the only life she'd ever known. Mrs. Liu was in the hallway, eyes wide with fear and curiosity as she saw the suited men. Emma? What's happening? Family emergency, Emma said, the lie coming easily. I need to move my grandmother tonight. Thank you for everything, Mrs. Liu. The older woman's eyes flicked to Lorenzo, taking in his expensive suit, the way he stood slightly behind Emma like a shadow. You be careful, girl, she said in Mandarin. I will, Emma replied in the same language, then added, "He's not what you think." "Men like that are always exactly what you think, Mrs. Liu said, but she squeezed Emma's hand before retreating to her apartment. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work, so if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Emma's apartment door was already open, men carefully packing boxes with an efficiency that would have been admirable if it wasn't so surreal. Her grandmother sat in her favorite chair, looking confused but calm as a woman in medical scrubs spoke to her in soothing tones. "Nai," Emma said, dropping to her knees beside the chair. "We're going on an adventure." Her grandmother's eyes focused on her, a moment of clarity breaking through. "Emma, is it time?" "Yes, Nai. Time to go somewhere new. Somewhere safe. With him?" Her grandmother looked at Lorenzo, and Emma expected fear, but instead, there was something like recognition. "He has sad eyes, like your father did after your mother got sick." Lorenzo knelt beside Emma, his movements careful and non-threatening. "Mrs. Chen," he said, his voice gentler than Emma had ever heard it. "I'm Lorenzo. I'm going to make sure you and Emma are taken care of." "You're dangerous," her grandmother said matter-of-factly. "Yes," he admitted. "Good. My Emma needs someone dangerous. The world is too sharp for soft people." She patted his hand with her wrinkled one. "You'll protect her?" "With my life." Her grandmother nodded, satisfied, then looked at Emma. "I like this one better than that Mark boy who used to call." Emma's cheeks burned, but Lorenzo just smiled, a real smile that transformed his face. "I like to think I'm an improvement." The move happened quickly after that. Emma's few possessions packed into boxes. Her grandmother settled into the town car with the nurse. The apartment that had been her refuge and prison for 3 years emptied in less than an hour. As they drove through the gates of Lorenzo's estate because of course it had gates, Emma felt like she was entering another world. The house was massive but not ostentatious. All clean lines and warm lights, surrounded by gardens that probably looked stunning in daylight. "The guest house is through there," Lorenzo said, pointing to a smaller building connected by a covered walkway. 2 bedrooms, full kitchen, completely private, but close enough for medical emergencies. "Doctor, Morrison will stay tonight to help your grandmother adjust. This is too much. This is necessary." He led them inside, where more staff was already preparing the space. "Your rooms in the main house are on the 3rd floor, overlooking the garden. Or you can stay in the guest house with your grandmother. Your choice." Emma looked at her grandmother, who was already being settled into a bed that looked more comfortable than anything they'd ever owned. "The main house," she said quietly. "She needs routine, familiarity. If I'm always here, it'll confuse her more." "Practical even now," Lorenzo observed. "Someone has to be." He showed her to her rooms, a suite bigger than her entire apartment, with a bathroom that belonged in a magazine and a view that would be spectacular come sunrise. Her few boxes looked pathetic in the space, but Lorenzo didn't comment on them. "There's clothing in the closet," he said. "My sister's. You're about the same size. Take whatever you need." "I couldn't. She would want them worn, not rotting in storage." He moved to the door, paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. This isn't the life you chose." "No," Emma agreed, "but it's the life I have now. And you'll survive it?" She thought about Tony Ferretti's hands on her, about the bruises already darkening on her wrist, about the war that was coming because of intelligence she'd gathered. Then she thought about her grandmother, safe and cared for, about Lorenzo's hand in hers in the car, about the strange feeling of being protected instead of just enduring. "I'll do more than survive," she said, and meant it. Lorenzo studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Breakfast is at 7. Your official duties start tomorrow. But tonight, rest. You've earned it." He left, and Emma collapsed onto the bed so soft she might disappear into it. Through the window, she could see the city lights in the distance, the world she'd left behind for this strange new existence. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Marco. Boss wanted you to have my direct line. Any problems, any threats, any bad feelings, you call. No questions asked." Then another, from Lorenzo's number. "The docks are secure. The Ferrettis will find nothing but empty warehouses and disappointment. Your intelligence saved us millions and possibly lives. Thank you." Emma stared at the messages, at this strange new reality where she mattered, where her observations had weight, where dangerous men offered protection instead of threats. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, learning to navigate Lorenzo's world. maintaining the facade of a simple housekeeper while being so much more, staying one step ahead of the violence that circled them like hungry wolves. But tonight, for the first time in years, Emma felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. Safe. She was safe. And in Lorenzo Castellano's dark empire, that was worth more than all the money in Chicago. The first week in Lorenzo's house taught Emma that there were different kinds of prisons. Her apartment in Chinatown had been a cage of poverty and exhaustion. This estate, with its marble floors and infinite rooms, was a gilded fortress where every comfort came with invisible chains. She learned Lorenzo's routines with the same attention she'd once given to cleaning schedules. He woke at 6, trained in the gym until 7, took breakfast in his study while reviewing reports from his lieutenants. He left by 9 most mornings, returning unpredictably sometimes for lunch, sometimes not until midnight, occasionally not at all. But it was the in-between moments that fascinated her. The way he'd stop by the guest house each evening to check on her grandmother, bringing flowers or Chinese sweets that made the old woman smile. The way he'd appear in the kitchen while Emma was cooking, silent as a shadow, watching her work with an intensity that should have been frightening but instead felt like protection. "You don't have to cook," he said one evening, as she prepared wontons the way her grandmother had taught her. "That's not part of your duties." "I like cooking," Emma replied, not mentioning that it was one of the few things that still felt normal. "And you have the worst eating habits I've ever seen. Whiskey and coffee are not food groups. They've kept me alive this long. Barely." She set a plate in front of him, handmade dumplings in black vinegar sauce. "Eat." He raised an eyebrow at the command but picked up his chopsticks. The first bite made his eyes close, a small sound of pleasure escaping that did strange things to Emma's pulse. "These are incredible. My mother's recipe. She used to say food was love made tangible. Is that what this is?" His dark eyes found hers. "Love?" The word hung between them like a loaded gun. Emma turned back to the stove, her cheeks burning. "It's wontons. Don't read too much into it." But she kept cooking for him anyway, and he kept appearing in the kitchen at dinner time, and neither of them mentioned how this had become a routine that felt dangerously close to domestic. The second week brought trouble in the form of Anthony Castellano, Lorenzo's cousin and underboss, a man who looked at Emma like she was a problem to be solved. "She knows too much," Anthony said during a meeting Emma was definitely not supposed to overhear from the laundry room adjacent to Lorenzo's study. "A cleaning girl who suddenly lives in your house? People are talking." "Let them talk," Lorenzo replied, his voice bored. "They're saying, she's your weakness. That you've gone soft since Sophia." The sound of a fist hitting desk echoed through the wall. "Choose your next words very carefully, cousin." "I'm trying to protect you." Anthony's voice was careful now. "The Ferrettis are circling. They know something disrupted their dock plans. If they connect it to the girl, they won't. But if they do, then I'll handle it." Lorenzo's tone suggested the conversation was over. "Emma stays. That's final. At least let me assign her protection. She has protection. She has me." The silence that followed was heavy with things unsaid. Emma pressed closer to the wall, her heart racing. "You're falling for her." Anthony's voice was flat, resigned. "I'm protecting an asset. You're protecting a woman you watch like she might disappear if you blink. I've seen how you look at her, Lorenzo. It's the same way your father looked at your mother, and we both know how that ended. Get out." "Lorenzo." "Out." Footsteps, a door slamming, and then silence. Emma stayed frozen in place until she heard Lorenzo pour himself a drink, the crystal decanter clinking against glass. She gathered the laundry and slipped out the other door, her mind spinning with the implications of what she'd heard. That night, she found Lorenzo on the terrace, smoking a cigarette and staring at the city lights. She'd never seen him smoke before. "Those will kill you," she said, stepping out into the cool night air. "Many things might kill me. At least this one's slow." He didn't look at her, but shifted slightly, making room for her at the railing. "Anthony doesn't trust me. Anthony doesn't trust anyone. It's what makes him good at his job. He thinks I'm making you weak." Lorenzo finally looked at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. "You're not making me weak. You're making me remember why strength matters. I don't understand." He flicked the cigarette into the darkness, turning to face her fully. "For 2 months after Sophia died, I was nothing but rage. I wanted to burn the whole city down, everyone in it. Didn't care about collateral damage, didn't care about anything except making someone hurt the way I hurt. What changed? You walked into my conference room, terrified but thinking clearly. You looked at me, really looked at me, and didn't see a monster to run from or a king to bow to. You saw a man. It reminded me that's what I am, underneath everything else. Lorenzo, the Ferrettis are planning something, he interrupted. My sources say there's a contract out. A significant one. On you. Emma's blood turned to ice. What? Tony figured out you were the one who heard about the docks. He's taking it personally. Lorenzo's jaw clenched. 50,000 to whoever brings you to him alive. Alive, Emma repeated, the word tasting like ash. He wants to make an example. Show what happens to people who spy on the Ferrettis. Lorenzo moved closer, his hand coming up to cup her face. I won't let that happen. You can't be with me every second. Watch me. The next 3 days proved he meant it. Lorenzo rearranged his entire schedule to stay close. He worked from home, conducted meetings in his study, while Emma cleaned nearby, followed her to the guest house when she visited her grandmother. It should have felt suffocating, but instead, it felt like being wrapped in armor made of shadow and intention. On the 4th day, they came. Emma was in the garden, cutting flowers for her grandmother's room, when she heard the first shot. Lorenzo appeared from nowhere, tackling her to the ground as bullets shredded the roses where she'd been standing. Stay down, he commanded, his body covering hers completely as he pulled out his phone. Marco, we have shooters. North wall. Lock it down. More gunfire. Closer now. And Emma could hear men shouting in Italian. Lorenzo pulled a gun from his jacket, the metal gleaming dull and deadly in the afternoon sun. Can you run? He asked. Yes. When I say go, you run for the house. Don't stop. Don't look back, no matter what you hear. What about you? Go. Emma ran. Behind her, she heard Lorenzo's gun firing, measured shots that spoke of deadly precision. She heard screams, curses, the sound of bodies hitting ground. The house door was so close when someone stepped out from behind the fountain, a man she didn't recognize, his gun already raising. She didn't think. The garden shears were still in her hand, and she drove them forward with all her strength. They sank into his shoulder, and he screamed, the gun falling from his hand. Emma grabbed it without thinking, her finger finding the trigger as another man rounded the corner. She fired. The gun kicked hard, the sound deafening, but the man went down. Emma stared at the body, at the spreading red stain, her mind struggling to process that she'd just killed someone. Emma! Lorenzo's voice cut through her shock. He was there, pulling the gun from her numb fingers, checking her for injuries. Are you hurt? I shot him. You survived. His hands framed her face, forcing her to look at him. You did what you had to do. Is it over? For now. He pulled her against his chest, and she could feel his heart racing as fast as hers. But this was just the beginning. The Ferrettis won't stop. Then we stop them first, Emma heard herself say, and she meant it. The man she'd shot was still on the ground, still dead by her hand, and she felt nothing. Just a cold clarity that this was her life now, and she would do whatever it took to protect it. Lorenzo pulled back to look at her, something shifting in his expression. We? You said I belong to you. But that goes both ways, doesn't it? You're mine to protect too. He kissed her then, hard and desperate and tasting of violence and promise. When they broke apart, his forehead rested against hers. This is going to get worse before it gets better, he warned. I know. You could still run. I could set you up somewhere safe. No. Emma's voice was steady now. Sure. I'm done running. Done being afraid. They want a war? They'll get one. Lorenzo smiled then, dark and beautiful and deadly. That's my girl. And in that moment, covered in blood and surrounded by bodies, Emma realized that's exactly what she was. His girl. His soldier. His queen in a kingdom built on bullets and blood. The transformation was complete. The shy maid who'd walked into the wrong room was gone. In her place stood something harder, sharper, forged in fear and tempered in violence. Emma Chen was ready for war. 3 weeks after the attack, Emma stood in Lorenzo's study, staring at surveillance photos spread across his desk like tarot cards predicting death. Tony Ferretti at a nightclub, Tony at a restaurant, Tony leaving his mistress's apartment at 2 a.m, unguarded and vulnerable. He's getting sloppy, Marco observed, pointing to the last photo. Same routine every Tuesday. We could take him there. Too easy, Lorenzo said, his fingers drumming against the mahogany. Tony doesn't get sloppy without reason. It's bait. Emma picked up one of the photos, studying Tony's face. Even in grainy surveillance footage, his arrogance was clear. What if it's not bait? What if he just thinks he's untouchable? Nobody's that stupid, Marco said. Men like Tony are, Emma countered. He's used to getting what he wants. Women, money, power. No one's ever really told him no and made it stick. She set the photo down. He's not being strategic. He's being petulant. Lorenzo looked at her with that intensity that still made her pulse race. You've been studying him. Know your enemy. She'd been doing more than studying. She'd been learning how to read financial reports, how to track shipments, how to identify weak points in an organization. Lorenzo's library had books on everything from Sun Tzu to forensic accounting, and Emma had been devouring them all. The Ferrettis are hemorrhaging money, 3 failed shipments this month alone. Because we've been intercepting them, Marco said with satisfaction. Yes, but look at the pattern. Emma pulled out a ledger she'd been working on, her neat handwriting mapping connections the men had missed. They're not random targets. These are all shipments connected to Vincent's old network, the one you dismantled after that night. Lorenzo went still. Tony's trying to absorb Vincent's territory, and failing, Emma added. Because Vincent's people are loyal to you now. They remember who saved Vincent's life, who gave him a second chance. Tony's trying to build on a foundation that's already yours. Clever girl, Lorenzo murmured, and the approval in his voice warmed her more than it should. So what do you suggest? The fact that he was asking her opinion, that Marco wasn't even protesting her involvement anymore, showed how much had changed. Emma was no longer just the maid who'd seen too much. She was becoming something else: consigliere, strategist, the person who saw angles others missed. Let him keep failing, she said. Every failed shipment costs him credibility. His father is old school, he values success above all. How long before he decides Tony is more liability than asset? You want to turn his father against him? I want to let Tony hang himself with his own rope. We just have to make sure he has enough of it. Lorenzo smiled, dark and appreciative. Bloodless warfare. I like it. Oh, there'll be blood, Emma said, surprising herself with her own coldness. Just not yet. That night, she found herself unable to sleep. The weight of what she was becoming pressed down like a physical thing. She padded barefoot through the dark house, ending up in the kitchen where she found Lorenzo already there, pouring himself whiskey. Couldn't sleep either? He asked, getting a second glass without being asked. I keep thinking about who I was 6 weeks ago. Emma accepted the drink, the burn of alcohol oddly comforting. She wouldn't recognize me now. Do you miss her, the girl you were? Emma considered it. She was exhausted all the time, afraid all the time. But she was. Innocent, I guess. Clean. And now you're dirty? Lorenzo moved closer, his presence filling the space between them. I killed a man. I'm planning the destruction of another. I'm drinking whiskey at 3 a.m. with the most dangerous man in Chicago. She met his eyes. Yes, I'm dirty. Does it bother you? It should. Emma took another sip. But it doesn't. That bothers me more than the dirt itself. Lorenzo's hand came up to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. You're not dirty, Emma. You're sharpened. There's a difference. Is there? Dirty implies corruption. Something spoiled. You're not spoiled. You're hardened. Refined. Like steel and fire. Pretty words, Emma said, but she leaned into his touch. True words. His thumb traced her jawline. You think I don't see what this costs you? Every decision, every adaptation, every piece of yourself you reshape to survive in my world. I see it all. And I'm selfish enough to let you do it. Because I need you. The admission seemed to surprise him. Not just for strategy or intelligence. I need you, Emma. You make me remember why any of this matters. Lorenzo, I love you. The words hung in the air like a confession and a curse. Emma's breath caught, her heart hammering against her ribs. You can't, she whispered. Too late. He cupped her face with both hands now. I've loved you since you looked me in the eye that first night and chose not to beg. Since you offered yourself as a spy to save your grandmother. Since you shot a man to protect yourself without hesitation, and then asked if we were going to stop the Ferrettis first. Love is dangerous in your world. Everything's dangerous in my world. At least love makes the danger worthwhile. Emma kissed him then, pouring all her, and confusion and fear, and matching love into the contact. Because she did love him, this dark, dangerous man who'd saved her and damned her in equal measure. When they broke apart, she was crying. I love you too, she admitted. God help me, I do. Then stay with me, not as my employee or my asset, as my equal, my partner, my queen. Before Emma could respond, Lorenzo's phone rang. He answered with a growl, but his expression quickly shifted to alertness. When? How many? A pause. We're on our way. What is it? Emma asked. Your grandmother. The Ferrettis found the guest house. Emma's blood turned to ice. They raced through the covered walkway, finding the guest house surrounded by Lorenzo's men. But something was wrong. There were no signs of violence, no broken windows or forced doors. Inside, they found her grandmother sitting calmly in her favorite chair, sipping tea across from a well-dressed older man Emma recognized from photographs, Giovanni Ferretti, Tony's father. Ah, Lorenzo, Giovanni said pleasantly. And this must be the famous Emma. Please sit. Your grandmother makes excellent tea. If you've hurt her, Lorenzo started, but Emma's grandmother laughed. This nice man? No. He brought mooncakes. She held up the traditional Chinese pastry. Good ones, from the expensive bakery. Emma moved to her grandmother's side, checking for any signs of distress, but the old woman seemed genuinely content. What do you want, Giovanni? Lorenzo's hand rested on his gun. To talk, peacefully, despite my son's recent stupidity. Giovanni's weathered face showed genuine exhaustion. Do you know what it's like, Lorenzo, to watch your child become everything you tried not to be? Tony's your problem. Tony's dead. The words landed like a bomb. Emma felt Lorenzo go rigid beside her. What? Killed 3 hours ago? Shot in his mistress's apartment? Very professional. Very clean. Giovanni's eyes never left Lorenzo's face. I know it wasn't you. Your style is more dramatic. Then who? That's what I'm trying to determine. Giovanni stood slowly, non-threatening. Someone wanted us at war, Lorenzo. Someone benefits from the Castellanos and Ferrettis destroying each other. Emma's mind raced through possibilities, connections forming. The Russians. Both men looked at her. Think about it, she continued. They've been trying to move into Chicago for years, but you two control too much territory. Together, even as enemies, you're unbreakable. But if you destroy each other... The city's wide open, Lorenzo finished. Giovanni nodded slowly. Your woman is clever. Perhaps we should listen to clever women more often. He looked at Emma's grandmother. This one told me I was an idiot for letting Tony run wild. Said a good father guides with wisdom, not just power. Emma said, exasperated and fond. What? It's true. These men, they think violence solves everything. Sometimes, you need to think. Her grandmother patted Giovanni's hand. This one learned, maybe too late for his son, but not too late for his family. Giovanni stood to leave, pausing at the door. The boy Vincent, the one your Tony tortured, he saw something that night. Someone else in the building, someone who shouldn't have been there. Who? He was too scared to say before, but with Tony dead. Giovanni pulled out a phone, showed them a security photo. Mikhail Volkov, the Russian Pakun's eldest son. Lorenzo studied the photo, his jaw tightening. He was there that night, in my building. Setting us up, Giovanni said. My son was hot-headed enough to take the bait, and you were grieving enough to believe the worst. He looked old suddenly, every year showing. I propose an alliance, temporary, until we deal with the Russians. And then we go back to civilized enemies. But first, we remind everyone why Italians have run this city for 100 years. After Giovanni left, Emma found herself holding her grandmother's pays at hand while Lorenzo made calls, mobilizing his forces. The old woman dozed peacefully, unaware of the danger swirling around them. She called him an idiot, Lorenzo said, something like wonder in his voice. Giovanni Ferretti, who's terrified judges and senators, and your grandmother called him an idiot. She has dementia. She doesn't understand. She understands more than you think. He knelt beside the chair, studying the sleeping woman. She knew exactly who he was, what he was. She just didn't care. That's the disease talking. Or maybe it's clarity. When everything else falls away, only truth remains. The next days blurred together in a haze of preparation. The alliance with the Ferrettis was uneasy but functional. Two wounded predators agreeing not to tear each other apart until the bigger threat was handled. Emma found herself at the center of it, translating between organizations that spoke the same language of violence but with different dialects. She also found herself changing more. Lorenzo had his tailor make her clothes elegant dresses that concealed body armor, designer jackets with hidden pockets for weapons. She learned to shoot with Marco, his patient instruction turning her from desperate amateur to competent marksman. You're a natural. Marco told her after she put 6 bullets center mass at 20 yards. Steady hands, steady nerves. I'm terrified, she admitted. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. It's when you stop being afraid that you get sloppy. But she wasn't afraid. Not really. Not anymore. The fear had transformed into something else, determination, perhaps, or acceptance. This was her life now. These were her people, and she would protect them with everything she had. The Russians made their move on a Tuesday. Emma was in the guest house when the alarm started, the security system screaming warnings. Through the window, she saw men in tactical gear scaling the walls, more coming through the main gate that had somehow been opened. "Annie Nye," she said urgently, pulling her grandmother from her chair. "We need to hide." Hide from what? But she followed Emma to the safe room Lorenzo had installed, a reinforced panic room hidden behind a bookshelf. Emma got her grandmother inside, then hesitated. Lorenzo was in the main house, along with Marco and a skeleton crew. Most of their men were positioned at strategic points around the city, waiting for an attack that was happening here instead. "Stay here," she told her grandmother. "No matter what you hear, Emma, I love you, Nai." She grabbed the gun Lorenzo had given her, a compact 9mm that fit perfectly in her hand, and slipped out of the guest house. The grounds were chaos, muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness, men shouting in Russian and Italian and English. Emma made it halfway to the main house before someone grabbed her from behind. She reacted on instinct. The self-defense moves Marco had taught her flowing naturally. Elbow to solar plexus, heel to instep, spin, and shoot. The man dropped, and Emma didn't let herself think about the life she'd just ended. "Emma!" Lorenzo's voice from the terrace above. He was pinned down, 3 Russians using covering fire to advance on his position. She didn't think, just acted. The first Russian never saw her coming, her bullet taking him in the back. The second turned, his weapon swinging toward her, but Lorenzo's shot dropped him first. The third tried to run. Neither of them let him get far. "What are you doing?" Lorenzo demanded when she reached him. "You should be in the safe room." "Shut up and reload," Emma said, surprising them both. "How many?" 20, maybe more. "They jammed our communications. Reinforcements won't know we're hit until—" An explosion rocked the house, fire blooming from the east wing. "They're trying to drive us out," Emma realized. "Flush us into the open. Then we don't go." Lorenzo's face was grim. "We make our stand here." "No," Emma grabbed his arm. "We do exactly what they expect, but we do it our way," she explained quickly, Lorenzo's expression shifting from skeptical to impressed. "That's insane. That's why it'll work." They moved through the house, Emma setting fires of their own, controlled, strategic, turning Lorenzo's mansion into a trap. The Russians pushed forward, confident in their numbers, not realizing until too late that they were being herded. The main hallway became a killing field. Lorenzo and Emma at one end, Marco and 2 other men at the other, the Russians caught between them with nowhere to run. It was brutal, efficient, and over in minutes. But Mikhail Volkov wasn't among the dead. They found him in Lorenzo's study, sitting casually behind the desk like he owned it, a gun trained on them as they entered. "The famous Emma," he said in accented English. "You've caused me considerable trouble." "Not as much as I'm about to," she replied. He laughed. "Brave little mouse. But you should know. Your grandmother's safe room isn't as safe as you think. My men have it surrounded. One word from me, and they blow it open." Emma's blood turned to ice, but she kept her face calm. "You're lying." "Am I?" He pulled out a phone, showed them a video feed the guest house. Men with explosives pressed against the bookshelf that hid the panic room. "Let her go," Lorenzo said. "Your fight is with me." "No, my fight is with both of you. You turned my careful plan into chaos. Tony Ferretti was supposed to kill you, Lorenzo. You were supposed to kill him in revenge. The families would tear each other apart, and I would pick up the pieces." "But Emma heard your plan," Lorenzo said, understanding dawning. "One little maid, in the wrong place at the wrong time, destroyed months of preparation." Mikhail's gun swung toward Emma. "So she dies first. Then your grandmother. Then you, Lorenzo. And then this city belongs to—" The shot came from behind them. Mikhail's expression turned to surprise. Then, pain, as he looked down at the spreading red stain on his chest. He tried to raise his gun, but a second shot dropped him completely. Giovanni Ferretti stood in the doorway, smoking gun in hand. "Russians," he said with disgust. "No sense of honor." He looked at his phone. "My men have secured the guest house. Your grandmother is safe, Emma." Emma's legs nearly gave out from relief. Lorenzo caught her, held her up, held her close. Why? Lorenzo asked Giovanni. Because despite everything, we're family. Twisted, violent, complicated family, but family nonetheless. Giovanni holstered his weapon. And because your woman was right, sometimes we need to think, not just react. The aftermath was messier than the battle. Bodies to dispose of, police to bribe, stories to coordinate. But eventually, the estate was quiet again, wounded but standing. Emma found Lorenzo on the terrace at dawn, watching the sun rise over a city that had almost been lost to chaos. It's over, she said, though it wasn't really a question. This part is. He pulled her against his side. There will always be another threat, another war. I know. You could still leave. Take your grandmother somewhere safe. Start fresh. Emma turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd become her salvation and her damnation. And miss all the fun? He kissed her then, soft and deep and full of promise. Marry me, he said against her lips. That's not a question. No, it's not. He pulled out a ring, elegant, understated, perfect. You're already mine, Emma Chen. This just makes it official. My grandmother will want a traditional Chinese ceremony. Then she'll have one. And I want to keep working, not as a maid, but as your advisor, your partner, equal in all things, he agreed. And if we have children, when, he corrected, when we have children. Emma smiled. When we have children, they get to choose their own paths. No forcing them into the family business. Agreed. He slipped the ring onto her finger. Anything else? Yes. She pulled him down for another kiss. No more meetings in conference room A. That place has terrible memories. Lorenzo laughed, the sound rich and genuine. We'll have it renovated. Turn it into something else. A library, maybe. I'd like that. They stood together as the city woke below them. No longer the maid and the Mafia boss, but something new, something stronger. I love you, Emma said, the words still feeling strange and wonderful on her tongue. And I love you, Lorenzo replied. My unlikely queen, my unexpected salvation. Your partner in crime, literally. That too. In the guest house, her grandmother was making breakfast, humming an old Chinese song about love and war. Giovanni Ferretti had stayed, claiming the old woman made the best tea in Chicago and promising to teach her to make proper Italian sauce. It was a strange family Emma had found herself in, built on blood and bullets, held together by loyalty and unexpected love. But it was hers, and she would protect it with the fierce devotion of someone who'd learned that sometimes the only way to survive the darkness was to become something the darkness feared. The shy maid who'd walked into the wrong meeting was gone. In her place stood Emma Castellano, wife, warrior, and queen of a criminal empire that would think twice before underestimating her again. And somewhere in the city, in boardrooms and back alleys, the word spread. Lorenzo Castellano had taken a wife. A clever Chinese girl who'd gone from cleaning his offices to planning his strategies. A woman who'd shot Russians without flinching and made Giovanni Ferretti listen to sense. They called her the Quiet Queen, and they learned to fear her more than they feared Lorenzo himself. Because Lorenzo's violence was predictable, brutal, but straightforward. Emma's was subtle, strategic, and by the time you realized you were in her crosshairs, it was already too late. Together, they were unstoppable, and Chicago would never be the same. The wedding was everything Emma's grandmother wanted, and nothing the Chicago underworld expected. Red silk and gold dragons mixed with Italian Catholic traditions, vows spoken in 3 languages. A reception where maid men in expensive suits did shots of Beiju while Emma's elderly Chinese neighbors from Chinatown taught them to play mahjong. Your wife is terrifying, Marco told Lorenzo, watching Emma gracefully navigate between wildly different groups, making everyone feel welcome while subtly gathering information. She just got Judge Patterson to admit to taking bribes while teaching him to use chopsticks. I know, Lorenzo said with pride. The Torelli family is considering switching their allegiance to us because she remembered the boss's mother's birthday. She does that. And somehow, she's convinced the Irish to give us a better deal on the docks by speaking Gaelic with O'Brien's grandmother. When did she learn Gaelic? Last month, apparently. Said she had time while you were in Detroit. Lorenzo watched his wife laugh at something Giovanni was saying, the old man having become an unlikely grandfather figure to her. Her grandmother sat beside them, lucid today, regaling them with stories of Emma as a child. She's perfect, Lorenzo said simply. Perfectly dangerous, Marco agreed. Best thing that ever happened to this family. Later, as they danced to an old Sinatra song, Emma rested her head against Lorenzo's chest. Happy? He asked. Getting there, she said. Ask me again in 50 years. Deal. And in the corner, her grandmother watched them with knowing eyes, remembering her own husband, her own choices, the way love could bloom in the unlikeliest places. She'd forgotten many things as the disease progressed, but she remembered this. Her granddaughter had found a man who would kill for her, die for her, and more importantly, live for her. In their world, you couldn't ask for more than that. The music played on, and the quiet queen danced with her dark king, two souls who'd found each other in violence and chosen to build something beautiful from the ashes. Outside, Chicago glittered in the darkness, unaware that its underworld had just become significantly more dangerous. Because Emma Castellano was no longer playing defense. Now, she was building an empire, and God help anyone who stood in her way. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.